Welcome to the Good Reading Podcast, proudly sponsored by Book People Gift Cards. A Book People gift card is the perfect gift for readers of all ages. Simply order your gift card online at bookpeoplegiftcards.org.au. Redeem at any one of over 500 bookshops across Australia. Visit bookpeoplegiftcards.org.au.
The weekend vanishes in sleet and rain and the distant roar of two cities becoming one. In her attic room, she works feverishly on a piece that pours out of her as if she has been harboring this story all her life, but for which there were no words. Her hand aches. The piece causes her emotional but somehow also unrelenting physical pain, and she accepts it as much as she can. It goes with the territory. She fills the notebook and starts another. Each phrase expresses what words never could. Susanna reaches through the decades and finds the anguish, the devastation, the personal grief of her grandmother having to face her own death in what had to be the most unbearable of circumstances. Sometimes she doesn't even see the notes, doesn't feel the cramp in her hand, hears only the rise and fall of a ghostly orchestra playing in her head, coming from her heart, wanting the world to feel what she feels. At the same time, she starts to understand her mother, Naomi, how she fills her life with busyness and bustle, pushing away what must live in her DNA, the loss and death of her own mother, Mirla. Susanna fills the silence that no one in her family has been able to, with a composition that takes hold of her and demands to exist. With little sleep and a first draft written, Susanna leaves the apartment on Sunday. She walks to the Tiergarten, a large green space, the lungs of Berlin. Ahead of her, she sees piles of rubble as the dismantling of the wall all over the city continues. She gathers with a group of onlookers on muddy ground to bear witness to the destruction of the former border.
Hello and welcome to the Good Reading Podcast. Shelley Davidow is an award-winning international author who grew up in South Africa. Writing across genres, her 50 books reflect her experiences living and working on 5 continents over 2 decades. Her recent publications include the memoirs Runaways, Shadow Sisters, and Whisperings in the Blood. Today, I'm talking to Shelley Davidow about her novel, The Girl with the Violin. Shelley, welcome to the Good Reading Podcast.
Thank you so much, Greg.
Your story opens at a very significant moment in history, the winter of 1989 and the fall of the Berlin Wall. And you were there.
I was. Inadvertently, I found myself. I was a young person. I was visiting someone, and we heard on the radio that the wall was coming down. And so we rushed out to be there. And I had absolutely no idea what was about to transpire. It was absolutely pouring with rain, and we arrived in this mass of people, a young friend and I, and the crowds were just thick as it was like a fish farm. And there ahead of us was this wall that just a few days ago, if anyone would have been trying to climb over it, they would have been shot. And all of a sudden, it was just completely covered with young people standing on top of the wall. And there was a crane smashing a hole through the wall, a gap, and there were people chipping away. And then there was a moment a couple of hours later when there was an actual gap in the wall. Not very big, probably about the size of a small single-car garage. And it felt like every person in West Berlin and every person in East Berlin was trying to push through that gap, each crowd going in opposite directions. And I thought I was going to die. I was going to be suffocated in that crowd. And the emotion and the feeling, I remember hearing a woman shouting at a guard who seemed to, I don't know why he was standing there. And she said, "Can I go through?" And he nodded, and she just pushed her way through. And she said, "My mother's on the other side." So I was very overwhelmed by the emotion of that moment. People had been separated from each other since 1961. The wall went up pretty much overnight. It went right through the city. It blocked off roads. It cut apartment complexes. There's like one on one side and one on the other. And there were just families divided overnight. So you can imagine the emotion there.
And of course, extraordinary things can happen at moments like these. Life-changing events often lead to heightened emotional states, and none more so than for your main character, Susanna.
Yes. So Susanna, she has a lot of similarities with me, but also a lot of differences, thank goodness. And she is at the wall when it comes down, and she's with her very famous violin teacher, Stefan Heinemeyer, who's 17 years older than her. She's 20, he's 37. And she's on a scholarship to Berlin from Australia, from Brisbane, because she's kind of a violin prodigy. She and Stefan hear that the wall is coming down during one of her lessons, and they rush out at night together. And she is absolutely in awe of him. She loves him, but then she starts to fall irrevocably in love with him. And it's the unbelievable heightened emotions of that night with all the euphoria and all the angst and all of that rushing together in the rain that precipitates what will play out for the rest of the novel, which is really Susanna's journey and her coming into her own as a woman and a musician.
And Susanna is a young Jewish Australian girl, as you said, from Brisbane, and she has a great deal of insecurity about her.
Yes, she's kind of a nerd. She's never had really anything to do with relationships or anything. I don't know if you know a lot of young musicians like that, but I certainly did. You know, people who are just so passionate about one thing that that's pretty much all they do. So she's insecure about herself. She doesn't know how to relate to guys very easily. And, this is her first big moment overseas. She's Jewish, her teacher's German, and she discovers that she is with this man who is the grandson of a Nazi, and she is actually the granddaughter of a Holocaust victim. So their histories are completely in opposition to one another, and yet she finds herself drawn to this man and his music through the music that they play together.
And Susanna is deeply infatuated with Stefan.
Yes, she is first in love with the music that he plays and the way that he sees her allows her to be a self that perhaps she only ever dreamt of becoming. And so it's his seeing her that then opens up this connection between them. And it's through the music that they kind of feel each other's souls. There's a kind of resonance and a real acknowledgement of the talent that they each see in each other. So it's actually first through the music and the love of the music and the ability to connect through the music that this happens. But then, of course, she falls in love with him and she can't distinguish what she feels about her music from what she feels about him.
The Girl with the Violin might be deemed a coming of age story, but I thought of it as more complex than that. Certainly, it's a journey to maturity for Susanna, but also a kind of reconciliation with her origins and with the Holocaust and, of course, Nazi Germany's role in it.
Yes, absolutely. It's much more than a coming of age story because I guess she's already of age when the novel opens officially. She's nearly 21. But it is her journey through life, and it's her journey also backwards through history to uncover some of the inherited traumas and dispositions and stories that lie in her family. The love that Susanna feels for her teacher overrides the reality of their heritage. And as Susanna embarks on her journey to uncover her past, she makes peace with what lives in her through her connection with Stefan, because obviously he's not a Nazi sympathizer. He's a genuinely uh, kind and very, very supportive human being. And he is the grandson of a Nazi. So I also explore what it means to be the inheritor of a legacy like that. Like what happens when you find out your ancestors did atrocious things? Does that mean you too are an atrocious person? And of course it doesn't, but it does mean that you carry their stories. So Susanna and Stefan both carry these kind of burdens, these stories, and it's through their music and their regard and the way that they see each other that some of this looks like it could be resolved or at least transformed. You can never get over it, get past it. I suppose I believe personally in the power of love. It's a very transformative power, and in the power of coming to terms with what happened and then being able to write a new story for the future. So that's really what I can say without plot spoiling. Susanna's journey is very fraught and it's very important. And it's kind of an every woman's journey. Maybe it's an every man's journey to some degree. But the details are, the juicy parts, and that's what makes the story unique.
Her connection to Stefan and her talent, her obvious talent, brings up certain jealousies amongst the group, the violin group, and that becomes a bit of a problem for her colleagues.
The music world, like any world, like the drama world or the writing world, can become quite ferocious when jealousies arise. And so Susanna in the music world is seen by her fellow students as the teacher's pet, the favorite. And that, of course, is very problematic because everybody wants to be treated equally, and Susanna seems to be being favored. And really, it is because of her prodigious talent. But that doesn't go down well with the other young people who are there on their scholarships, also trying to become, the greatest at what they do.
Other love interests emerge, and I love the way you describe one of them, Dirk, like getting chewing gum on your shoe, which stubbornly refuses to shift.
Yes, so she's still just a young adult, and so the attentions of her other violin playing colleague are unwanted, and he kind of is very sticky, so he sticks to her. And so yes, I use that metaphor of you stand on chewing gum and you're like, whoops, I stood on that. Like you invite someone out for dinner, and then she tries. If you try to get chewing gum off your shoe, then it might stick to your fingers, and then you try with your other hand, and then it's just sticky. So her connection with Dirk is sort of, she's trying to be gracious, but it's not working. And in fact, it just makes him more and more sticky. And that actually becomes a catalyst to how the novel then plays out for decades afterwards.
Life in Berlin leads Susanna on a very personal creative endeavour as well, beyond her violin performance studies into her own composition, a piece underscored by two German terms, Kopfschmerz on one hand and Liebesschmerz on the other. Both are very powerful emotional drivers for Susanna.
Yes, when she begins this composition in honor of her grandmother Mirla, she has a terrible headache, and she makes the headache actually part of the composition. But she's also driven by, it's a lovely German word, Liebesschmerz, which is just love pain, one word, one concept, not the pain of being in love, but just the ache, I call it. And that drives the composition. So it comes straight from the physical pain and the emotional pain that she's feeling. And she wishes to honor her grandmother through this composition. And then she feels at a certain point that it's right that she should be in pain, or that it's fitting. It's not something to be pushed away. And so she tries to do the composition in that state without giving up and just kind of embracing the physical state that she's in.
Let's get back to Berlin, a city that acknowledges its past but also looks to the future. That's evidenced by its vibrant cultural scene. I think of Berlin as a truly international city, welcoming and open to new ideas. Is that how you see the Berlin of today?
Yes, I was there in 2023, and it was amazing because the last time I'd been there was 1989. So the transformation was absolutely complete. It was a completely different world. The last experience I had was that rainy night in November 1989, and I was there in the summer of 2023. And it's a modern, multicultural, busy, bustling city. And I took taxis everywhere and I asked people questions. So all of the discussions in the book are drawn from real discussions. Like I talked to several Aussies, people who had grown up in the former East and really wanted their opinion on things. And I talked to people who had lived in the West and people who had lived on both sides. And I asked one of the taxi drivers whether there was anything that still distinguished East from West, like that was absolutely noticeable. And he said, yeah, many things, but actually from space, if you look down at the city at night, it's completely divided because the lights on the east side are more golden color, and on the west side they're blue because of the different bulbs they use on the street lights and housing and everything. And so he said the division is still absolutely clear from space. I thought that was really fascinating. Economically, it's still different. And there is a very, I suppose, rush towards the kind of Western future, and you can just see it. I mean, all the main shops that you see everywhere in the world are at the center of Berlin. It's not like it's Germany, Germany. It could be anywhere. So I really noticed that. Whereas when I was there last, it was super German, and the Trabis, the funny little white cars that were made in the East, that were the only cars pretty much that everyone except government officials drove. They'd all poured in to the West, and they were everywhere. And now the only one I could see was in the Museum of East Germany. So there was one little Trabi there, and I went to see it. And yeah, so huge change, and still a place of shadows and light for me, because I think there's a remarkable kind of memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe that I went to that feels very tastefully and beautifully done. The Jewish Museum, designed by Daniel Liebeskind, is absolutely amazing. And I got a lot of inspiration from going to these places in terms of just building Susanna's connection to her past, which is different to mine. I mean, they're parallels, but it's quite different. So yeah, it was absolutely amazing to go to Berlin in 2023, and to just see that up against my memory of it. So there was this moment, because there's still a section of border wall that is there as a kind of memorial to what was. And I went to see that. And then there was this moment when I was standing at the Brandenburg gates. And I remembered it felt like a split second that I was standing on the other side of the gate, and it was 1989, it was raining and it was winter. And then all of a sudden, here I am, and it's 2023. There's no trace of a wall. There's some brickwork with some bronze writing under your feet at certain parts saying Grenzmauer, which is border wall. So you can know where it was, but you just step over it. And yeah, so it's quite amazing to feel history like that. And I've tried to capture that in the novel at various points along the way. That sense of Berlin, it was the place where so many of these awful things happened during World War II. So many of the decrees that went out, so many of the decisions that were made there. And it's a bit haunted for me. But then also there's these transformative places and moments and things that really acknowledge the past, which I found important.
My final question to you, Shelley, is about the violin. Your biography tells me that you've made at least one serious attempt to learn the violin. How serious, and is it a fixture or a frustration in your life?
It's a Liebesschmerz. It's a great pain in my life that I didn't do what I wanted to do. So I can sort of play the violin. I sound like a 10-year-old who's been learning for 3 years. That's how I sound. And then about, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago or so, I was like, right, I'm going to do this again. I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to do it. And so maybe I made it from like a grade 3 to a grade 4 AMEB. And like just to the point where it didn't sound like cat dying on the G string. But I'm very bad. I sort of play the guitar and sing, and then life just got in the way and I stopped going for lessons and practicing. So every now and again I get seized by a fit of I want to play the violin. And in fact, when I was writing a certain part in the novel about Susanna, I was like, I want to be her. And I jumped up and took out my violin and tried to play it. So Susanna is my wish fulfillment character. She's everything that I'm not in terms of her musical ability. She is who I would love to be. And so I've tried to capture her in a novel so that I can at least have a feeling of what that might be like and do it in literature.
Shelley, it's been wonderful to talk to you, and thank you for joining me on the Good Reading Podcast.
Thank you so much, Greg, for having me.
I've been talking to Shelley Davidow about her memoir, The Girl with the Violin. It's published by HarperCollins, and you can find it at goodreadingmagazine.com.au. My name's Greg Dobbs, and thanks for listening. This Good Reading podcast was brought to you by Book People gift cards. Share the joy of reading with a Book People gift card. To find out more, visit bookpeoplegiftcards.org.au.